Hello everyone and welcome to A Fictional Escapist, a new channel here on the Booktube sphere of the internet. My name is Kris and today's video just serves as an introduction to who I am, what I like to read, and where I'd like this channel to go in the future. So, like I said, my name is Kris. It begins with a K, and that's because my parents didn't want anyone to spell it correctly on a form ever in my lifetime. The second thing to know is that I'm a 30-year-old transgender bisexual man who walks with you on this earth. And you may be wondering, what does that have anything to do with reading? And the answer is honestly not all that much, except there are a few people out in the world that prefer that I don't exist, and I'd rather that I weed those people out now. I have been on YouTube before. This is not my first time. I've documented my transition from before testosterone right up until earlier this year, basically, when I sunset that channel and put it to bed, but it's there if you ever want to hear me very, very squeaky voiced and pre-testosterone. What I like to read, that's what we're here for, get into the books, is I mainly delve into sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. My two go-tos are generally fantasy and horror. I have only just very recently started getting into sci-fi. Not big on the space operas, but I'm willing to give them more of a try. In fact, I'd like to give them more of a try to see if I can crack into enjoyment in that realm of sci-fi. In terms of fantasy, I like big, chunky fantasies. Dark, gritty, having some really either morally grey characters are my favourite thing in fantasy, or just in general fiction ever, and answering big questions, or talking about these big ideas that we have in our society that we don't really get to explore in a realism sense. Things like religious ideation, power versus corruption, and manipulation of that power. And I think that the genre of fantasy opens itself up to exploring these ideas quite beautifully, and we've seen that in a lot of the books behind me. In terms of horror, I like very abstract, very weird horror. One of the best things that I read in 2021 was Eric LaRocca's Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. I thought that was a brilliant look on not only submission and domination, but also how dangerous the online communities and presence can be to the psyche of what were young women in this story. And he executed it so well within, it must have been 100 pages maybe. I read it in an hour or two sitting at a dining table at my grandma's house while she was doing puzzles. But it was just brilliant. Other than that, in terms of horror, I like slow burn, suspenseful horror, but I have dabbled in other genres as well. I've read some speculative fiction, I've read some magical realism, and I do enjoy those other genres. I don't read a whole lot of contemporary. I've read a few in my lifetime, I've enjoyed a few in my lifetime, but it's not something I'll generally go to pick up. I am looking at expanding that. Now, I did mention before a little bit about myself. Because of those things, I do want to start reading more LGBTQIA+ stories, whether that be in the form of non-fiction in terms of memoirs, or just seeing it portrayed in fiction. I think we're seeing a lot more of that nowadays, and I'd like to delve into that world a little bit more, and that's a segment that I would like to build on this platform as well. In terms of where I want this channel to go, I'm going to play the game for a little bit. So you're going to see book hauls, you're going to see TBRs, you're going to see monthly wrap-ups in terms of, I'd like to do the wrap-ups a little bit differently. I'd like to sort of have a look at my original TBR and then what I actually read for the month, because a lot of the time it's quite varied, whether I stick to a TBR but then add on more, or I just completely ignore what I want to read in the month. I think it would be interesting for me, at least, to go back and look at those things. In the long run for this channel, after I've played the game for a little bit, I want this to be a safe space for self-pub and indie authors in terms of things like, I'd love to have self-pub indie authors come on and interview with me, talk about their work, particularly if they're only people that are trying to get people to read their books from things like Facebook and Instagram. I'd like to focus my reviews mainly on self-pub and indie books, maybe do some more in-depth reviews of those books, rather than the mainstream sort of or published works that go through a traditional publishing house. Those books I may still review, it just might be sort of a gloss over, because a lot of other booktubers or bookstagrammers are going to be doing that stuff with the big names that have already been attached to the likes of Tor and Orbit and Angry Robot. things like that. So I want this to eventually become a hub for self-pub and indie authors. And that's pretty much it. I'm here because I love books. Like a lot of other booktubers, they start their channels because they don't have people in their lives to gush about the written worlds to, and that's exactly why I'm here as well. If you want to join me on this journey, you know what to do. Hit like, subscribe, all those good things, and I'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.